All right, here we are again. It's been a little while, but I'm back. Oh boy, it's been a long week. Okay, where do I begin? First of all, I have an episode that I hadn't put out, not because of the content, but because my buddy Avrami that I recorded with, um, unfortunately had a problem uploading, and quite frankly, I don't know what to do about it. And it was a good conversation. It was a lot of fun. We always have fun talks, and this one was no different. Ran about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, and then I had I guess really an 8 or 9 day holiday called Sukkot, Jewish holiday, um, and it was a ton of fun. Again here in South Florida, and it is after I guess tornado season, or after a hurricane season rather. There is the heat breaks, and it's like the hurricane sucks up all the humidity from the entire South Florida or entire state of Florida, and just sends it flying over into the oceans, and it becomes so much more pleasant to be living out here. I didn't record any episodes um, this past week and change because of this holiday. Of those, in the last, I guess, 10 days, I spent about six of them not using electronics, which is an incredible break, in my opinion, from life. I missed a good amount of work. I missed doing these podcasts, but it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing to think that we live in a world, I think for the most part, that taking time off and taking time away is not considered valuable. It's considered kind of a last resort and something you have to do if you have no other choice. And I, I'm sure that it's multifaceted and that there's a lot of different layers to these concerns. And I know for myself, for example, I feel like every day that I'm not actively building myself up towards accomplishing something or achieving something, I feel like I'm wasting time and wasting my potential. I, as I've come to kind of treat myself a little better and get to know myself a little bit more, I do recognize that not only is it necessary to kind of give myself these breaks, but it's even more necessary in order to actually continue being productive, to continue putting out quality work, to continue, with that kind of new, fresh excitement in day-to-day life. You need a break. You need to give yourself an opportunity to recharge your batteries. I'm kind of wish that I put a couple episodes out, or at least scheduled a couple of them in advance, so that I don't have to go very long without putting out new content. But we're still starting out, and I'm going to give myself a little bit of a pass over here with that. Being in South Florida this time of year is always a little nostalgic for me. This is my third fall time being down here, and I typically love being upstate, being in New York, and being up north, at least for this time of year. And then I also love being in the New York area, even Manhattan area, around Christmas time. I'd say between November and December, try to get a visit in, or at least end of December, and really try to just soak in. I mean, if you haven't been in Manhattan in November, December time, it's really something that you got to do. And there's just something, obviously the weather is cooler in South Florida than it is the rest of the year, but there's something about, I guess this kind of shows how, how, how strong marketing and how strong our associations are. But there's something so wonderful to a cold December and to all the lights that are in New York, and all the trees and all the buildings and all the, even though you don't associate trees, but there's still a shocking amount of them. And all the streets are just covered in nightlights, and it's really just mesmerizing. And South Florida doesn't really have that. It doesn't have the change of seasons. I guess that's kind of the reason, I imagine, why people retire here. I've thought this many, many times. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but it feels to me as though the there's got to be something biological, potentially. I don't know, even psychological, about the notion of changing of seasons representing a passing of time that we all experience one way or another. And I think that having a tangible change of your environment around you from winter to spring and spring to fall and fall to, fall to summer, but not obviously in that order. um, but there's something tangible about every couple of months looking around you and having a sense of things are different now. And A, am I different? B, should I be different? And C, what have I done or what can I do in the future to to change because, as the world around me changes. And Florida is not really the place of change. You would, or at least by association. People associate Florida. I don't really anymore. I kind of used to more, but people associate Florida with with being retired and being older and waiting. Death's waiting room is an expression I've heard 100 times before, and I kind of get that because at a certain point, while it is nice to have good weather all the time, everything kind of feels the same for the most part, unless you really go out of your way, or unless I go really out of my way to say, okay, X time by X time of year, every X amount of time, every 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, to just kind of sit down and collect my thoughts and collect what I've been doing until now, assess what I've been doing until now, and how satisfied am I with my life, with my time. And it's a shame. It's a shame that I don't have it, but I actually think that I mean, if I guess the fact that I'm aware of it is helpful enough that I could continue. And I just had the thought right now because I picked up my guitar for the first time in years. Not to play because I've been playing a lot, but to write something new, to write some new lyrics and to write some new poetry and to really come up with something that I'm feeling a little bit more of the urge to express myself creatively. I've had I try to beat myself up if I don't do everything all the time at one time. I want to be a great guitar player and learn a lot of great songs. I want to be a great writer. I want to be a great teacher. I want to be a great salesman. I want to be a great father. I want to be a great podcaster. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great family member. I want to be a great friend. I want to be part of the community. I want to be a good, moral, valuable to society and to the world member of the Jewish people and an American. And there's so many different things. I want to keep myself in shape. I want to keep myself emotionally and mentally sharp and satisfied. I want to be healthy in whatever ways I can. Um, and Side tangent, speaking of healthy, is after my whole podcast about going the month without drinking, I ended up pushing it off until now because I kind of got pushed. I kind of got bullied into it, although I wasn't really being bullied. I kind of made that decision myself. Where beginning of October, it was the high holidays, Jewish high holidays. They call them in Hebrew Yamim Noraim, and my cousin happened to be joining, and that was the first day of my sober month of no alcohol. And he comes in, he goes, "Hey, it's my birthday," and I'm like, "Sweet, let me give you a shot." And I pour him a shot, and he goes, "You're not having one with me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm doing a dry month." Because you can't do a dry month now, starting my birthday. And to me, for context, also, my cousin doesn't have any other family down in South Florida other than me. He doesn't. He rarely travels back to back to the tri-state area where he's from, and he doesn't have too much family around most of the time. So I really felt, so I felt guilty. And then my friend comes up to me while I'm explaining this predicament to him in synagogue or in shul a little later. And I'm like, dude, I feel bad. It's my cousin's birthday. And, I just started this month without drinking. It's Kiwi Herschmann, who's the man, our buddy. And, and he's like, dude, why are you doing that? I'm like, well, I want to do it because it's healthy. I want to do it because I haven't done it since high school. I give him the whole reason why, all 45 minutes of my previous podcast. And he's like, okay. He goes, well, why don't you just start after this weekend? I'm like, that's cheating to start after this weekend. I don't know. It's like, what, inconvenient because it's someone's birthday that I have to drink? And he goes, well, you're going to drink on Sukkot, on this holiday? So I wasn't really planning on it. He said, but you're hosting your in-laws and friends and everyone for 9 days, right? I was like, yeah. He said, I think that you should start after the holiday. So I am. So it started. So instead, I'm starting last night, and I'm going to. So which last night was, oh God, October 24th or 5th, and I'm going to go till Thanksgiving now. So instead of, I guess, I'll do must no shave November and sober November at the same time between now and Thanksgiving. And then maybe we'll do a Thanksgiving Day episode with Kiwi and hopefully my buddy Guy, who will all be together. Hopefully, we'll be together and we could do a proper sit down. I want to get a Guinness tap installed into my house, and we can sit down and we'll pour Guinnesses and we'll talk about the month. But that's just a quick update. Long story short, or actually short story, much longer rather. And anyway, so I'm beating myself up about. I'm used to beating myself up about all this stuff, and I think that I've learned to be a little bit kinder to myself, even though it's naturally extremely difficult for me. I'm naturally harsh on myself. I'm naturally afraid of wasting my time and my potential. And then if I feel like I'm wasting it in any capacity, I'm upset at myself. So I'll keep on going until I'm about to burn myself out, or I do burn myself out. And then I can't do anything for a little while because I'm burnt out. And then I'll continue. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore to myself. And not only that, I think that I could really compartmentalize my life and my time enough that I don't even think that I should have to do that. That I found this to be the case with guitar and a little bit with writing poetry as well, which is even if I don't, even sometimes if I'm practicing guitar for a couple of days, and then I end up sitting and after a couple of days sitting down and playing an old song that I knew or that I used to play or that I practiced, I found that I have to give myself a couple of days and some rest and a little bit of break from the guitar. I found that my I feel like I'm better. I feel like my body and my brain and my heart kind of had a little bit more time to process what I was playing, and I learned how to play things differently, or it feels more natural, or feels like there's a better flow to it. And I kind of hope the same thing for the podcast. The truth is that I'm doing another episode, I think tonight, with my buddy Sam Chosak. Right now it's about 8 p.m. I'll probably record for another 45 minutes or half an hour, and then I'll probably do a couple of hours of Sam. Sam and I are going to record around midnight because he's on the on the West Coast, and he has a birthday party. And one of the things that I've also found, and I'm sure is human nature, I'm sure that's relatable, is when you take a break from something that is not easy, it takes a little bit of more work to get yourself back into that rhythm. This is kind of more prevalent in jogging, for example. for a lot of people, or working out. That a lot of people, they'll work out for a week or 2 weeks or a month, and then they'll miss 3 or 4 days to go on vacation, and then they fall out of the whole routine, and everything goes sideways. And these solo episodes are fun to do. I feel like they're not, I don't enjoy them, I think, as much as the conversations with people for a variety of reasons. Number one, I enjoy bouncing ideas off of other people a lot more and hearing other perspectives other than just the gears in my own head kind of whirring. And two, I there's more space for emergent conversation and emergence in general to occur. Emergence, which is one of my favorite things in the entire world, is the notion that when you have two individual components, and this applies to really anything, but two individual components, the sum of those individual parts creates something totally new and totally independent of each, something that each of those individual parts could have contributed or brought to the table by themselves. And I've planned one or two of my solo episodes. Rarely do I actually end up sticking to everything because I kind of like to go with a more natural flow and more of a stream of consciousness when it comes to talking and it comes to expressing ideas. But with someone else, I'll I'll have new thoughts when I'm talking with other people. I have new thoughts that I've never thought of before, and a lot of times I'll be prompted by that individual, and it's fun. I actually, it's funny because I have, I think, 3 or 4 people that are lined up that have agreed to do the podcast, but are kind of blowing me off, and they're nervous, and they told me that they're nervous, and I know that they're nervous, and I know that it's not an easy thing. I think a lot of people have a hard time talking in general for an extended period of time, let alone recorded with someone. These are not necessarily people that I know super, super, super well. And it's definitely intimidating. It's definitely unnerving. So I wanted to throw myself back into a solo episode, get content out, share, get back into the groove of things, and really force myself to get back onto that, get back onto the train. And here I am. And so it feels like now I'm going to, I hope to transition a little bit of my focus and my efforts now from um, hmm, trying to figure out from where to where. I want to just be writing more. I think I want to be doing a little bit more creative expression. I really want to finally just get down the ability to write songs and write music. Something I always had. I've noticed this about myself in general, and that is that I don't like to learn. How do I say this? It's not that I don't like to learn new things. I don't like to dive into things that I feel like I have absolutely no idea how to do. And if there's ways to learn and it has the same kind of fundamental or foundational roots as something that I'm already comfortable with. I'm already comfortable with talking with people and public speaking, so podcasting isn't a very big step off from that. But when it comes to pretty much anything that I don't have any experience with, that I'm starting with from scratch. For example, part of this holiday of Sukkot is the notion that you're supposed to spend most of your time in a little shed slash hut. And obviously, there's certain parameters, according to Jewish tradition, that you have to keep. For example, the walls have to be, it has to be at least 2.5 walls, so it has to represent at least majority of what would be an acceptable kind of temporary house. There has to be a roof. You have to eat your meals in it. Ideally, you're supposed to sleep in it, although if there's any real level of discomfort and concerns environmentally or in terms of animals or anything like that, then you don't really have to. And and you have to buy, and generally speaking, they sell frames for these kind of things, and people are creative, and they buy, they buy wooden slabs, and they kind of put two walls together. I'm not handy with my hands. I'm not good with this kind of thing. And before I drove down to Florida with my wife, after being in New York for the summer, my parents gave me their old sukkah, which consisted of 14 or 12 poles. It consisted of 12 poles, and we start to put it together. And I don't know how to put these poles together. I don't know. I've never built one of these things before. And it turns out that we're missing half the poles. I only took about half the ones that I needed. And so I was going to go to Home Depot and I was going to try to figure out for myself, be like, you know what? This is what you have to do. This is what being a, adult is. This is what being a father is. This is what being a man is all about. You're going to go to Home Depot. You're going to buy some raw materials. You're going to build your own sukkah. That thought lasted about 10 steps into Home Depot. And then I thought to myself, I have no idea what I'm doing with myself. And then comes, first, it comes the realization that you can't do it, which is, I thought that I was such a tough guy and I thought I would be able to handle this. And I thought I was such an adult and I have no idea what I'm doing right now. And then that feeling is quickly followed by a little bit of panic that, that, come on, dude, you can't find a way to support some canvas walls in between a couple of poles, or you can't find any kind of raw material to just put this up with. And then it became a feeling of internal self disgust and frustration at my in a bit that frustration at my typical panicking and fear when it comes to doing anything new that I'm not comfortable with. And there in Home Depot, I had but I had a little bit of a breakdown where not a full on breakdown, but just a sense of despair and hopelessness for my future and for my ability. I was like, if I can't do this, how am I supposed to take care of my kids? If my kids need anything, how am I supposed to do that? If my wife needs something, how am I supposed to do that? And I end up beating myself up. And obviously, of course, the whole time there's an easy solution around the corner, which is that my in-laws have one, and because my in-laws were coming to me, I went to their house and I picked up their sukkah, if you're Israeli, and I built it myself in an hour, with and everything turned out okay. And I have to find a way to show myself, just like with this sukkah situation. I have to find a way to show myself that I can do creative things with music and with a guitar and write a melody and write songs. And I have to come at it from a place of patience and a place of building on something that I already know that I can do. I already know that I know chord families. I already know, you know, structure in terms of music. I already know how to kind of pick up notes in any given, if I'm playing in any given scale. So just a matter of getting all that stuff together. Then I've got to figure out. So that's in terms of the creative expression. Now it happens to be I'm pretty good at coming up with lyrics. I wanted to work on a stream of consciousness variation. There's an incredible one of the most actually it's ranked and rated and viewed as one of the most significant albums in rock history called Astral Weeks, Astral, I think, Weeks, by Van Morrison. Wrote it in 1968, and when he was living in Boston. And most of the songs that he wrote for that album, according to Van Morrison, although the story kind of changes a lot, he's a little bit of a grumpy, hippie kind of musician. I feel like not too dissimilar from Bob Dylan in the fact that they're really both enigmas that people just don't know how to figure out. But Van Morrison, basically, what he would do is he would sit in his apartment with his wife at the time, Janet. He called her Janet Planet, and he would and he would just take his guitar and he would strum a couple of chords, and he would record himself with his eye, or his wife would record him with his eyes closed, and he would just talk, and he would just come up with different phrases and see what stuck, and come up with and just went with the stream of consciousness, not too dissimilar what I'm doing right now, or what I do in general with my podcast, except this is obviously vis-a-vis poetry. The other thing that I also have a hard time with when it comes to music, writing, or writing stories in general, writing in general, is I have a very hard time keeping a large picture in my head, an extended picture. So if I had, most stories have a beginning, and then everyone kind of goes through some kind of climax in terms of challenges or something to overcome, or some kind of period of growth or pain, and then it peaks when they find the solution, they navigate their way through, and then it kind of close out a little bit. And then if you're really talented, you're really good, you can kind of take that little world that you created, and similar to the way that I've described, that what I adore about modern day stand up is that you have one story, and you pull at all the details in the story like different strings, and you kind of just stretch each detail as far, as much as you can. A really great example of this is the way that The Sopranos is written, and there are so many it revolves around a family of four, and by extension, really say six, because you have Tony's mom and Tony's sister, but Tony's married and he has two kids, and then everyone in their lives gets a storyline, and everyone that's even further associated from them, that Tony doesn't even necessarily know very well, we get shown what those characters' lives are like, and we get shown what their perspective is like. I'm really, really bad at keeping all those ideas and thoughts and stories and narratives in my head at one time, and I'm also really bad at coming up with them. So, for example, if I'm writing a song or a poem about feeling lost while going for a drive, that's vague enough of a context and doesn't really have any kind of narrative or storyline that drives it, that I can really zone into the descriptive words and the mood and the environment. And so everything will revolve around the wheel and the way that my chest is tight and my head's spinning and I slam on the gas, and I feel the I feel the pull of the engine. I feel like my own fear is getting ripped out of my guts and left behind on the street by behind my car in the dust. And that that's what I can write. But when it comes to songs that have full storylines, there's an amazing song by Bruce Springsteen called "Incident on 57th Street." I want to say that's right. I hope it's right. But it's a modern day combination of like a West Side Story and Romeo and Juliet, and it's so beautifully told. The music is incredible, the lyrics are beautiful, and then you have a whole storyline, and you can really follow both characters, and you can follow the male partner and the female partner, and the different pulls in their lives and their background, and you feel like you know a whole person, you feel like you know a whole history, and the whole song is just, I mean, it's a relatively long song. I think it's maybe 5 or 6 minutes typically on a typical performance, but that has a full narrative. So I'm not sure whether I should just say, listen, there are certain things I'm good at and I'll stick with it, or know that there are things that I'm bad at and try to work on it. And I have to work on my patience. I have to work on if I don't, and I guess this is something that is a Gen Z. I don't know, anyone really born, I guess, with anyone that really grew up with technology and smartphones and stuff, is that you don't really have patience for the most part to try and work at something for a long period of time. There's no such thing as I don't know of anyone that works at a story or at a lyric or at a verse or at a chapter for months and months and months and maybe for a book if you're going to be writing in a little bit more of a formal setting. But so yeah, so for me, you know, I I I, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try setting myself a timer for 5 or 7 minutes, or even, excuse me, maybe even 10 minutes for say 3 or 4 days in a week, and check back in with another solo episode in a week or two, and see if I've been able to kind of come up with come up with something. It's hard. It's really really hard for me. But yeah, and so I wanted to work on the writing. I wanted to work on the podcast. I wanted to work on getting these guests. I'm not sure if it's holding more people back that I don't get very many viewers yet, or whether that is something that's actually more enticing to people, because a lot of the people that I get on are not typical podcast guests, and I really don't even care for them to be. I've noticed that there's been a circuit of there's like a podcast circuit that people do. People hit the big, so if someone comes out with a new book, if someone comes out with, some new research, a new study, or, they jumped into a new role, even if they started their own new podcast and they're really picking, gaining traction, they kind of do this whole, they make these rounds where they go to all the big podcasts. You go to Huberman, you go to Rogan, you go to Lex Friedman, you go to Theo Vaughn and Tim Dillon and oh God, now I'm blanking. All in, um, and there's so many mediums out there for so many people that want to. It's almost like a publicity tour, vis-a-vis podcasts. But I kind of want to be the one that gives the stories of, or at least the food for thought with more everyday kind of people, and those everyday kind of people aren't the people that are necessarily looking to share their experiences with 20 million people, or a million people, or 1,000 people. So I've kind of been going back and forth. I've been having a hard time getting enough guests to go on to get, or popular enough guests to have their own following, their own sharing, to really pick up myself. And then once I do get that, then I'm afraid that I'm going to lose a lot of the people that I'm actually interested in talking to. Like again, I was talking to Josef Hoffman and the other day, the other week, and we didn't even get into the whole story. He bought a rundown, empty hotel that was pretty much, kind of falling apart. And the benefits was that it had a liquor license and a food license and, whatever other paperwork that he needed, which is extremely valuable. But he took out a hard money loan, and is doing a lot of the work himself. And he's flipping everything around himself. And he's 28 years old, and and he's embarking on this crazy trip and this crazy journey that most people don't even dream about, or even if they did dream about it, they wouldn't even know the first place to get started with it. And he's just diving in, and the way that he made it seem, I think that he would be a lot more hesitant to kind of go onto the podcast and talk when, if there was going to be, you know 10,000, 50,000 listeners to the show. He kind of when I was coordinating with him to try to find the time to do this, he was a little hesitant, and I said, dude, you ain't got nothing to worry about. You're gonna have maybe 5, 10, 15. I think the most that anyone's listened is 20 episodes. Is 20 listeners an episode. And I just said, dude, there's nothing for you to worry about. And that kind of massaged his concerns, his fears, and he went for it. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see where it heads. I also, excuse me, I haven't taught in a couple of weeks. I'm excited to get back to that. The school that I teach at was a Jewish school, so I had off for this entire holiday. It's kind of a long version of like a winter break, but in the fall. And I've got to get back to that. And the problem with getting back to that is that I've been preparing some material, but once you're out of a groove, it's really hard to tell what how people are going to react to the new material and what material is going to keep people engaged, or the kids rather engaged. I bought two new books today that I'm really really excited about. I went to Barnes and Noble today for an hour by myself, and what a great experience! I think everyone should go to Barnes. There's something actually I prefer to support local bookstores, but there's something about the Barnes and Noble selection and overall environment that I do find to be extremely, extremely warm and extremely conducive to kind of just popping yourself down and just perusing the sections and really just, reading a chapter or two from any book that you're going to be potentially interested in. Get a coffee, hang out at the Starbucks, and just read. And so I got two new books. One of them is, which kind of spoke to me pretty deeply, and kind of it seemed really interesting. Also had to do with a lot of the material that my students had been previously interested in. We'll see how it goes. One of the books is about whistleblowers in general, and the who are whistleblowers, and what kind of personality does it take? Because, and the guy made a really good point, at least in the first chapter or two of the book, which is we generally look at whistleblowers as if there's some kind of national heroes. So you'll have a whistleblower like Ed Snowden, who has his reputation for, while some people think that he's a traitor to the government. I think that majority of the opinions on Ed Snowden is that he's kind of a hero for exposing to the American people, to what degree the government is invading their privacy. And then and then you have the kind of whistleblowers that you kind of see in the movies where they're upset, kind of bad guys that feel like they've been slighted by, the head of their company. So one example that comes to mind, I don't know if I'd necessarily call it quite a whistleblower, but I feel like it could have very easily been the case, is with Iron Man. And you had all his, in the was it the second Spider-Man movie after Tony dies, all his with Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, all the disgruntled Stark employees kind of come together to use their technology to kind of right the wrong that they feel that Tony Stark kind of did, that Tony Stark did to the world and did to the world around them. Now, that's not obviously a typical case of quote unquote whistleblowing, but as because Stark Technologies was a weapons manufacturing company, I'm sure that it wouldn't take a very, very large creative step to kind of figure out what exactly would be, to come up with a plot line on how there would be some kind of upset or hulking character in the background that felt as if they were being mistreated, and then does what they, that comes out with the story and speaks to the press about something questionable that Tony may have done in his private life or the way that the business works, and just that within the company that the rest of the world isn't privy to. But he says, and but that's not necessarily, being a whistleblower is objectively a pretty scary thing, because you kind of feel like you're turning. I keep on saying the word kind of. You feel like you're turning your back on on your team, on the people that you've worked with. Generally speaking, you worked with them for a long time, or you have some kind of history with them, and you're turning your back on them, and the people that you're working with are getting in trouble. And how can you do this? How can you betray the people that have given you this job and fed you? And so it goes against what I think a lot of our very tribal instincts are. So on one hand, you're either this blazing moral authority figure, or I guess anti-authority figure, that insists at the risk of everything and sacrificing everything and doing the right thing for the people and for the public and to bring out and bring to light the evil that's being done to everyone. That's one type of whistleblower. Or there's the pissed off, standing in the shadows whistleblower that you no one really likes very much either, and it's just pretty much a bad guy. But and this book is about in between, and it started how this professor who is it's really cool. I never even heard of the term, but a bioethics professor, and he, I suppose, spends his time and his life discussing the philosophy of the ethics of biology, probably specifically, but science overall. And so there was a student that was part of a as part of a psych experiment, and the kid had no business really being in this group as part of this experiment, and he just wasn't mentally well and wasn't mentally there beforehand, and he ended up killing himself in in the duration of the experiment. So this professor was the first whistleblower. He was blowing the whistle about it, about this kid, about this story. I'm trying to actually find the name of it while I speak. And then the next book is it's called Occasional Human Sacrifice. And then there was another book I got called I Heard There Was a Secret Chord. I don't know quite how dense this book is going to be for a 10th grade class. What I'm going to have to do is be really creative with this book and read the material and figure out a way to present it to the students rather than just have them read the book because it's too thick. But the book, I Heard There Was a Secret Chord by Daniel Levitin, who also wrote This Is Your Brain on Music. He wrote this whole book about music as medicine. And I'm really, really curious as to what that means because he's a very grounded guy, even just from reading the first chapter or two. Aside from the fact he's very grounded, he covers a lot of the things people would be that would be initially skeptical about when it comes to just the title name, Music as Medicine, which is, well, and I've been hearing quite a bit about this because the community that we live in has been going through a little bit of a spiritual phase with energy healing and energy stones and healthy foods and vibrations and stuff like that. So I think that there's definitely some kind of truth and reality to that. I don't think that every single person that picks up a book automatically becomes or listens to a podcast becomes an expert immediately on this story. But he immediately acknowledges like there is a science to like science there is a science to this stuff, and it's not quite as simple or blanket as, for example, like the old myth that listening to Mozart makes kids smarter. There's not really a science to just you automatically play music and everyone that's below the age of say 4 becomes more intelligent. Some kind of like superhuman neuro biochemical hack that, oh, if you just listen to some classical music between the age of 6 months and 4, you're magically going to be smarter. But he's saying obviously there's a bit more of a context, and the argument he's actually making is that there's no objective key, but there are tools to implement to help you know the right type of music to navigate or to listen to help navigate you through whatever experience you're going through at the moment. So, in other words, or for example, it's not that listening to Mozart is magically going to make you smarter, but in the context of trying to learn puzzles, I'm just using a hypothetical over here. I have absolutely no basis for saying this, but just for example, if you are working on puzzle solving or problem solving, and you have gentle, soft instrumental music or classical music in the background, that might help turn on, or I guess activate certain neurons in our brains, or pathways in our brain that make us more prepared to solve problems, that if I wasn't listening to that music, my brain would be a little bit less prepared to solve that problem. And I think, and so you could kind of use it as a tool to help prepare you for a task or for a mental state or an emotional state that you're about to be in. I can listen to slow music in the car on the way to a funeral, or happy music in the car on the way to a wedding, or Grateful Dead music on the way to hear a Grateful Dead cover band. And I'm opening my pathways up in my brain to prepare myself for the experience that I'm about to go through. I think that both those books are going to be really, really interesting and have an enormous amount of potential for these classes. But yeah, add tack that to the list. So right now, tonight, my list of things to get better at and things to work on is: number one, aside from not beating myself up, number one, a podcast. Number two, creative writing and coming up, making my own songs and melodies, or at least, yeah, we'll put that in one category. Three, story writing, learning how to tell a story and expand on it and kind of keep the whole story going on in my head, make it clear for myself, and keep track of it so that I could pull at that web and make a more rich fictional or real world, whatever I choose to do. And then finally, to be the best teacher I could be and come up with material that and come up with an engaging way to freaking tell these 10th graders about this music stuff and about this being a whistleblower notions, that I think could lead to really, really fun, thought provoking, and important classes that these kids could hopefully take that with them for a long time. So here we go. Episode, I think, 44 is wrapping up, and I'm going to I'll post this tomorrow. My episode with Sam on Tuesday. That's it for now. Have a good night, everyone.